Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Build a Sales Forecast You Can Trust, the third installment of our Business Growth Series. Due to the short nature of this webcast, we will not have a Q&A session at the end, but feel free to contact us afterward with any questions or comments you might have. Today's presenter is Scott Williamson. Scott is the managing partner and founder at Revenade and has over 25 years of experience getting sales teams to reach their full potential. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Scott.
Well, thank you very much, Dee. First thing I want to do is just do a quick technology check. Dee, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can.
Great. Well, thank you very much to everybody who's joined us today. We have a very exciting topic today, especially for any of you who are in the market where you are responsible for sales, or perhaps if you have a business or a business unit where sales reports up through you. As Dee talked about, my name is Scott Williamson, and I've been working in the world of sales, technology sales primarily, but sales in general, for the last 25 years, and I will do my best to make today's session informative and brief. I know that many of you have called in during your lunch hour, and although I can't guarantee this will be as satisfying as a steak or a healthy salad or whatever it is that suits your palate, I'll do my best to make this informative and entertaining. So the first thing to understand is, why are we taking time out of our lunch today? Certainly the area of sales forecasting is, again, very exciting and very important for all of us in the world of sales. But the key thing that we're trying to do is share information that we've gained from hundreds of companies related to sales forecasting. Now, this information has come from a variety of different sources. In 2013, we performed a sales and marketing study with a number of firms in small, mid-size, and enterprise corporations, and that was a very telling set of data. It's an annual survey we conduct. We've also analyzed a number of other surveys in the market, and then finally, this is from feedback from clients as well as from those of you on the call who have attended other sessions with us. So we know that sales forecasting is, in fact, an imperfect science, but I think as we'll see today that there are some scientific ways in which we can approach that. In order to do that, there are three core things that we're going to cover today. The first is we'll go through some, frankly, basic concepts associated with what sales forecasting is. And we hope these are concepts that you can apply immediately to your line of business or in helping other people inside your organization understand what sales forecasting is all about. The second thing we'll do is we'll touch on 5 core steps that we think are fundamental to mastering the sales forecasting cycle. Now, these aren't the only 5 steps, and this is by no means a cookbook with respect to how you can go about creating a sales forecast that you trust. But we do believe that if you execute on these 5 core steps, you'll be much farther down the road. And then finally, we'll touch on how we believe technology can help through this cycle. So from a timing point of view, you have to wonder why we've done this, and it's not by accident that we've decided to have this webinar at this time of the year. If you think about the calendar year, and assuming we're all on a fiscal year that is consistent with the calendar year, it's very much akin to a sports event, so a football game, and it's halftime. And the key thing that we all need to understand at halftime of a game or half point through the year is how's our team performing? So at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of the game, we all had high expectations. We put plans in place that we thought were achievable, perhaps aggressive, but we were confident in our team and we knew we were going to push the ball across the line and win the game. So the key thing at the half point through the year is, are we really going to forecast a win? Do we think that the progress we've made to date is sufficient, and do we have the right types of insight into where we're going to go through the remainder of this game to win? Now, in order to do this, in order to be able to have insight into the future, it would be nice if we all had a crystal ball. It would be nice if we touched on what we call are the 3 abilities. And the first is a crystal ball that would give us visibility into all the core data that we need in order to be able to see what our sales forecast would look like and where we'll be by the end of the year. The second thing is something that shows reliability. So it's one thing to have visibility into that data or into those future events, but we need to make sure that that visibility is reliable. And then finally, we need to make sure that whatever that data is and whatever the information is that we have, that we can make that predictable. So it's not useful to have visibility and reliability unless we can accurately say that this is exactly where we're going to be at the end of the year or at the end of the game. Now, this is very difficult, and in order to apply some sort of a framework around this by which organizations and people can be more effective, what we've done is we've developed what we call our enterprise sales predictability model. And we bring this up because it provides a framework by which we're going to walk through some of the best practices and lessons learned today. In today's session, even though each of these 7 different lenses interplay with each other, but can also stand on their own, we're going to talk about 5 core areas. We'll talk a little bit about the sales process, types of modifications you might need to make in order to make your sales forecast more predictable. We'll talk about some of the key measures that will give you insight into the intelligence you need in order to be able to predict what the future might be. We'll talk about something that most people don't talk about with respect to sales forecasting, and that's the incentive side. Of course, we'll touch on the various types of things that you might need to do to enable your team to be able to assist you with that process of sales forecasting. And then finally, we'll talk about some of the tools and technology that can enable you through that. Now, in order to understand how to do this, first we have to understand what a sales forecast is. And this may seem very rudimentary, and I'm sure there are some of you on the call who are kind of shaking your head saying, I know what a sales forecast is. And I'm sure you do. But you'd be surprised as we go from one client to the next, from small company to mid-sized company to some of the largest companies in the world, how much confusion there is around what a sales forecast really is and what it's not. Well, the easiest thing to understand is to apply some of these business concepts to what we see every day in our normal lives. And we've all seen forecasts, whether it's the weathercaster who's trying to tell us what tomorrow's weather is going to be so we can plan a picnic for a party for the weekend, whether it's us trying to predict our flight plans and when our flight is going to take off or land, or say, for instance, we're big sports fans and we want to understand which college team is the odds-on favorite to win at the end of the year. These are all forecasts. These are all predictions or estimates of a future event. And in all 3 cases, we know that even in some of these cases, like the weather, where we've been doing this since the beginning of mankind, we still don't have the ability to accurately always forecast what that future event might be. Well, forecasting sales is really no different in that it's very, very difficult to make sure that that forecast can be reliable and we can have the appropriate visibility, and ultimately that it can be predictable. So the first thing to do is to understand what a sales forecast is not. A lot of times, and probably the biggest misconception that we see across the various clients we work with and in all the reference data from our studies, is that the biggest misunderstanding is that many people think a sales pipeline is in fact a sales forecast. And whereas the sales pipeline is a very necessary input into a sales forecast, in fact it's the key input, it is not a sales forecast. A sales pipeline is simply something in your CRM or your spreadsheets or whatever it is you're utilizing to track all of your opportunities and summing all of those that we understand what the total potential might be of deals we could sell, at least the deals that we're tracking. A sales forecast, for those of us who are very committed to this on a day-to-day basis, is really just our best prediction of what we think our sales are going to be at some point in the future. And typically it consists of 3 core items. There's a commit part of the funnel. So that is the part of the funnel if we're in Q1 today. The blue part is the part that we know absolutely positively we are committing that we are going to hit that number. So if we're looking at Qs 2, 3, and 4, and we're in Q1 right now, in Q2 we think we're going to hit somewhere in the 32 to 33 million range in terms of absolute committed funnel. Then we look at the upside funnel, which are deals that we think are close in. We're not necessarily willing to say absolutely they're going to close, but we think that there's very good chance that those deals will close. And then the potential are the deals on top of that we're not counting on, and we're not even really sure that we think they're going to close. But if they were to close, that's the total potential value. If you look at the summation of these 3 bars, in many cases, and in fact in most cases, that should equal the total value of your sales pipeline in your CRM. But again, far too often we see people looking at the summation of these three lines as opposed to looking at the blue and saying that's our absolute commit sales forecast. So let's talk about the steps that we think are the most effective with respect to helping you master that sales forecast. And as we've looked at our reference data, again, the 2013 study, the other sort of macro studies we've looked at, and the feedback from you, we've seen that there are 5 core steps that are really assisting organizations like yours in mastering what that sales forecast might be. The first is, quite simply, since the pipeline is the major input into your sales forecast, is making sure that we're managing that pipeline effectively. Now, the blue stages here at the top represent our sales opportunity funnel. And the biggest challenge we've seen with most of our clients and most of our market research participants is that they spend too much time focused on just looking at their sales funnel. So they're more inwardly focused, and they look at all the various steps that they think it takes to get a deal from lead all the way to close. We found that the most effective clients out there in terms of being able to manage their pipeline not only look at the sales opportunity funnel, but they look at the client's buying cycle. So in this case, what we see most often is that the client is going to have an extended buying cycle, say for instance in this example, which is more of a technology play of an enterprise technology, that may take anywhere from 12 to 18 months for them to buy an end solution. Yet we see that the internal organization thinks that within 6 months, that's their average close window. And the reason why you can have such a large discrepancy between those two things is that the client is going to go through a very different buying cycle than through what we're going to go through on the sales funnel. The client is going to have a whole series of activities from determining their core need, doing initial investigation around what that solution might look like, whether it's going through initial demos, conversations, research of the market, etc., building that initial business case inside so that they can gain approval to move forward before they start going into further investigation to do more in-depth demonstrations, pilots, RFPs, and so forth. So often what happens is when we think we're working with a client and they're in the active buying cycle, they may in fact be in the first part of this cycle as opposed to the second part of this cycle. And this is key because if we're not actively working our pipeline with our sales reps, our first and second level field managers, and reviewing that funnel on a common basis and understanding how our sales opportunity funnel maps very distinctly into the client's buying cycle, we may be getting what we call false positives. We may be misreading the client's buying cycle and thinking that they're further in the second half of the cycle when instead they're in the first part. Now, ways to counteract that include, number one, making sure that we do have clear understanding of the sales opportunity funnel and the client buying cycle, mapping these stages, so in this case, mapping the qualify stage into this true further investigation cycle that the client's looking at, mapping each of the other subsequent stages and making sure that those are standard and consistent across all business units, all service lines, all product groupings inside of our company. The second thing is making sure that we have consistent win probabilities for each of these stages. So instead of trying to rely on the individual genius of someone saying, I know I'm only in the defined solution stage and this is a 90% deal, understanding that that's probably a 20% deal regardless. And then finally, making sure that we're sitting down with these people on a periodic basis to review this data from the top of the funnel to the mid-funnel and from the mid-funnel to the bottom of the funnel. The second thing that we touch on and that we've seen in the data is understanding which are the key measures that you need to track through this cycle. And in this case, we've highlighted 6 different variables. Now, some of these are pretty commonplace. Some of these are ones that we've only seen the highest performers in the market dealing with. The size of the deal certainly is very important. We've seen that in our data, small deals and large deals have a tendency to close slower than deals that are sort of in our average or mid-size set. Large deals close slower typically because they involve more people and it requires more analysis and more approvals inside the buying organization. Oddly, small deals also close slower because small deals typically don't have the level of importance that the organization feels that a large deal might have, and so they don't get the level of attention, and oftentimes the buyer is less sophisticated with respect to what it takes to get a deal all the way through their buying cycle. The second variable is time and funnel, and time and stage, the third variable. So these timing elements are important in that we need to understand what our averages are with respect to what it takes to sell something. And if we see something that's been in the funnel much longer than the average, then chances are we were probably in the first half of that buying cycle and we got a false positive and were selling to somebody before they were really ready to be sold to. The second thing with respect to time and stage is another way of looking at that. It's a more granular way of looking at that, but it can provide the same insight with respect to understanding if this is a real opportunity or not. Close date, as the sixth item here, is another common one that we see people focused on, which is making sure that we are doing everything we can to anticipate the appropriate close date, not from our perspective, but from the client's perspective. Now, items 4 and 5 are the two that we only see the top performers. And we have one client that's been very sophisticated with respect to how they do this. They look at the maturity of the client from a buying point of view. So has this client bought with us before? Have they bought this type of solution a lot before? Is it in an industry that is known for buying in a certain way? And within this, what they do is they actually rank each of the clients and the buyers in the opportunity funnel, and they use this as a factor. So for instance, if they're selling to a client that's in a governmental industry, say a federal industry, there are certain seasonal aspects with respect to how that industry buys, and there are certain politics, no pun intended, with respect to how they buy. And so that type of industry might have a lower maturity level. Yes, they do lots of buying, but the way in which and the consistency in which they buy may be all over the map. The next and final item that will lead to helping us define this close date is the engagement level, or the number of touches to which we've provided and offered up to this client through the sales cycle. If we have an opportunity in the funnel where we have touched that client very few times, then chances are the probability it's going to close and the ability for us to forecast that is pretty low. Now, of course, we always need to educate our team. We talked about this being an imperfect science, but one of the ways to make sure that we can make this more of a science and less of an imperfect science is ensuring that we have appropriate training for our staff. So I won't belabor this point, but suffice it to say that there's some sort of initial training that needs to be initiated with our entire selling organization to ensure that they understand our sales process and how that maps to our buying process, and that they understand why we're doing the forecasting. It's not just a reason for a field level manager or a vice president to beat on his or her team on a weekly or semi-monthly basis. It in fact is distinctly tied into the profitability of the company. And then finally, provide ongoing coaching through that cycle. So leveraging these forecasting sessions or these cadence calls with our team so that we can actually help coach them through each of the deals and come up with a more proactive and more realistic and predictive forecast. The fourth area is one that we've only seen a handful of our clients look at. One in particular I'll touch on is one of our clients actually incents their management based on reliability of the forecast and making sure that the sales forecast stays within a plus or minus 20% of what it actually is. They don't use this as a punitive. They don't take base away. They don't take incentive away. But what they do is if you've had a certain number of quarters in a row where you've been within the plus or minus, in their case, 20% range with respect to their forecast, then you have an accelerator that kicks in on your commission plan. So for field level managers or above, where they may be getting some sort of an override based on the performances of their teams, then they get a greater percentage if they can in fact forecast more accurately. There are certainly some boundaries that you need to take into account with this, and you absolutely need to do very meticulous modeling of your plans to make sure this can work. You also need to make sure it's achievable. But if you can do that, we've seen this with our clients as a very, very powerful motivator for incenting people to ensure their forecasts are predictable and realistic. The fifth area is quite simply just managing your forecast. So what we've seen with our clients and with the market data of organizations that are the most effective is that they have either weekly or monthly cadence calls with their teams where they specifically focus on the middle to the bottom part of the funnel. And the reason for doing this is to make sure, again, that we're going back and mapping to the client's buying cycle to ensure that we're eliminating those false positives and that we're doing everything we can with those real opportunities in our funnel to move them forward. So instead of asking our field level managers what's going to close this month and just going through a cover your behind activity, what we're really doing is we're helping them work those deals, and we're coaching them on the sales process and how to analyze those deals to move them through the cycle. So your field level managers and the end sales reps are seeing this as a coaching opportunity where management is really helping me close deals as opposed to just holding me responsible for a number that I don't have visibility in. So let's talk a little bit about how technology can help with this, because there's clearly a lot of technology out there. And the key thing to understand about why we're using this technology is that ultimately, yes, there's people, process, and technology behind every solution. But in this case, we really have to consider the people bias and understand that there are some people out there who are very conservative, and they will sandbag and they will estimate in such a way where they always come over what their number is for their forecast. And we have other daredevils out there who, no matter what, they think they can close every deal that's in their book, and they will estimate always higher than what their actual forecast is. Both of those can be equally painful and dangerous to the organization. So we want to use, if we can, technology and the data behind that to take out the people bias behind what's going on. So the key thing here is considering the data itself. And what we found, and one client we have does an excellent job with this, is they look at their conversion rates. They look at conversion rates by rep, by the product or service they're offering, by the clients if they have a lot of repeat business or account growth. They look at conversion rates for certain sizes of deals out there, and by that maturity of client we talked about earlier. And in looking at all of this, what they can also look at is the accuracy rate with respect to forecast by the rep or the manager, so that they can actually start to incent based on that, and they can start to coach their respective managers and reps around, we understand that this time you think this $3 million deal is going to close in 3 months, when historically, though, any deals over $750,000 have taken an average of 6 months to close. Why is it that you actually think that this deal is going to close in half the amount of time? So it gives us the ability to have more of a true coaching conversation with them and sort of massage the data to make sure that we're factoring out somebody who is overly aggressive or overly conservative with respect to their pipeline. And then finally, the more effective organizations out there have a fully dedicated sales operations function that is in fact using that technology we talked about. And these are really the sales data scientists, the people who operate in a very distinct and dedicated function that typically does not report up to sales. It's either going to report up to finance, or it's going to have a dual reporting relationship to sales and finance. And the reason for this is that we need these people to look at the data in a very factual way. In some sense, they know more about the pipelines, they know more about the forecast than any of the people in the sales organization, all the way up to your chief sales officer would know about this, because they see the data day in, day out. These are the people who can look at the trends. These are the people who understand how to leverage the technology to look at the historical data and the conversion ratios we've talked about. These are the people, by looking at the data, who understand which reps or which managers are the ones that are more conservative or are the daredevils, and they can help us in this process of incenting based on accuracy. So we can work with them to incent them based on accuracy, and they can also give us the data that we need to ensure that we are in fact incenting our teams based on that. And then finally, they can do a whole series of analysis beyond that and help us with the reporting so that we can make the informed decisions we need to report up to the CFO, the Chief Operating Officer, or the owner of our company that this is what our sales forecast really will be. So I've gone through these concepts rather quickly, and we've really just kind of touched on what this whole area is all about. Like I said earlier, it's an imperfect science, but it is a science, and it's an area that we spend a lot of time working on. So we are always looking for feedback from you with respect to the content we covered today, but also with respect to content that you think would be valuable for you moving forward. We continue to do these series, as Dee talked about. It's an entire business growth series, and we do these once per month. So if you don't mind, please send information to me at scott.williamson@redinade.com, or always feel free to call me, to give me insights not only on how this session went, but where you think we should go in the future. So having said that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Dee, and I want to thank everybody who's attended today. We will have this converted into a format that you can play at a later point, and we'll make sure to send that out to you. Dee, back to you.
Thanks again, everyone, for attending. We really hope you received some value from the session. As Scott reiterated, we are holding these sessions on a monthly basis, so if you have any ideas of topics you would like for us to cover, just reach out to us and we'll keep them in mind. Thanks again, and have a good rest of your day.